Hi everybody, welcome back to Get Together Gardening. Today we're going to harvest those potatoes that we planted back in August.
I got ahead of myself here. I meant to say April.
Before we harvest, there's some preparation that we need to consider first. You want to stop watering your potatoes about 2 weeks before you're ready to harvest. And if there's rain in the forecast, you might want to think about picking them before that rain comes. It's going to make your life a lot easier when it comes to curing and storing them. Potatoes take about 90 to 120 days until they're fully mature, but there's some other ways that we can tell that they're ready to go. So if we look at this plant here, you can see it's not as bushy as it was. It's starting to turn yellow and brown and looks mostly dead. That's how we know that the potatoes are ready to pick. To harvest the potatoes, we're just going to pull the plant. There may be some still attached, so you can just pull them off and put them in your pile. But then you just want to carefully dig around where the plant was. You can use your hands or a tool and start looking for potatoes, almost like a scavenger hunt. So we got one right here. It's a nice size. Now the reason you want to be careful is because if you're using the fork, you can cut through the potato. At this stage, the skins are pretty soft because they haven't been cured yet, and they're really easy to be damaged at this point. That's a nice one. You can see there, I went in a little too rough, and because the skins are so young, it scraped pretty easily. Occasionally you'll have potatoes that have matured on the surface of the dirt and they get high exposure to the sun, which actually makes them turn green. If you have any potatoes like this, you're going to want to get rid of them because the green is actually toxic and it's caused by the chlorophyll from the light from the sun. Okay, I'm back inside. I have all of my potatoes laid out flat. This was this year's harvest. Pretty good for 20 pounds of seed planted. This is a good time to inspect your potatoes. Look for any rotten ones or bad ones. If you store rotten ones with good ones, you have a chance of ruining the entire batch. The disease likes to spread with potatoes. It's a pretty common occurrence. If you only have a little bit, you can wash them and use them right away. But if you have a larger amount, like I have here, there's a couple more steps we have to do before we store them to use them over the course of the winter. So the first step for curing our potatoes for long-term storage is to lay them out flat in a single layer. I have mine on some wooden pallet tables that I made with an old shipping pallet and some 2x4s, and whatever didn't fit, I just put in a milk crate. You want to put the potatoes in an area that's away from the sun, so something like a covered porch or a barn or shed. Right now I have mine in my basement. And you also want to keep in mind airflow. You want to have the potatoes in a place where there's enough airflow, which is going to help them dry out. I have central air in my basement, so this spot's going to work out fine for me. And I also have the benefit of having a dehumidifier, which is going to take out some of the humidity in the air to help the potatoes dry out a little bit more. As you can see, my potatoes are still pretty dirty. And this is intentional because when you're curing potatoes, you don't want to wash them beforehand because this is just going to introduce more moisture into the potatoes when we're trying to achieve the opposite. You want to leave your potatoes out for at least a week, and this is going to draw out the moisture, but also help harden some of the skins to help strengthen them for storage. And it's also going to allow some of these cuts that we made while we were harvesting the potatoes to heal over for a little bit extra protection. After a week, you can put your potatoes in long-term storage. Now, what I like to do for that is use the milk crates. If you fill them about a halfway to 3/4 of the way full with potatoes, that's usually enough to where they're not overcrowded and there's still room for additional airflow. Now, when storing potatoes, you also want to keep in mind some of the same things when you were curing them. You don't want to store your potatoes in direct light, and you also want to keep them in a cool environment. Now, some people might think, well, maybe I can put them in the fridge. You don't want to put them in the fridge because usually there's not enough airflow compared to other methods of storing them. Now, one of the things I encountered last year was because, like I said, my basement has central air. In the winter, it still is a little too warm for them down here, even though we don't keep it as warm as the rest of the house. So they ended up forming these long sprouts. So I think a good idea for someone who's maybe in a similar situation to me might want to consider moving their potatoes outside to a storage shed or garage once the weather outside is cold enough to prevent the potatoes from maintaining a temperature where they might sprout. Another thing you can do is if your potatoes do last long enough, you can use these same potatoes to grow your crop next year. Okay, I want to show off a little bit. Up here, look at the size of this one. This thing is massive. It's got to weigh at least like, I don't know, 2.5 pounds maybe? It's good stuff. So if you like this video, be sure to leave a like, get subscribed because I have some pretty cool stuff coming up soon. Once again, thank you all for watching and happy growing.